Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the M3 Market Update. My name is Melody Wright, and I try to do this show to give you context about what's happening in the commercial and residential real estate markets against the backdrop of macroeconomics and the global economy. So, welcome back to sunny Tennessee today, and thank God it has been a little wild here in East Tennessee with crazy rains, 50-mile-per-hour winds down where I am, up in the mountains, even higher, up to 80, 90 miles per hour. You guys may have seen the flooding in Gatlinburg. I tweeted about that, which is very close to me. Hope to try and go check that out this weekend to see what the damage is. There are a lot of Airbnbs there, but it's been some wild weather this week, I think, across the country. I hope everybody is safe, including what happened in Panama City Beach. I have some boots on the ground friends there, trying to stay in contact with them to get an assessment, initial assessment of the damage. But I shared some images on Twitter, and it looks pretty bad. But we'll see how it goes. I tweeted out, this will challenge the reserves of citizens, which is kind of the insurance of last resort there. That's subsidized by the government. A lot of people have to use Citizens because they can't get any other coverage. So we're going to keep our eyes on that story. But a lot of wild weather, but just thankful it's very sunny today. Okay, so welcome back. We have a lot of data to go over. Want to talk to you because I haven't talked to you since that last jobs report. Everyone looked at the headline number and thought, oh, yay, we added more jobs. But in reality, if you dive deep into those numbers, you realize that it wasn't as rosy as everyone wanted to believe. You guys know that I'm a big fan of Jeff Snyder and Eurodollar University. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to a deep dive he did on that data, including sort of a divergence with the household survey. This is where they ask households how these questions, and things aren't looking rosy. He gave some stats that, in the past 4 months, we haven't seen such a drop in full-time jobs unless you go back to April and May of 2020. And in the past 6 months, we have dropped 1.6 million full-time jobs. And so most of the jobs, or many of the jobs that were added were, part-time. And, this is something I think we should all think about, and I remember very clearly from when everyone was talking about how great the job market was kind of between the GFC and 2019, and I didn't understand what everybody was talking about. There weren't any real good jobs. There were a lot of service jobs that were maybe paying a little more than they used to. Think McDonald's at $15, Starbucks at 12, but not a full-time job that would give you the wages you need to kind of achieve that middle-class lifestyle. And so just want to encourage everybody, when you see the headlines, you have to dig a little deeper. And of course, none of us have the time to really to dive into each of these series and become experts at it. One methodology I kind of use is when I'm following somebody that I like, I validate their methodology by doing my own little bit of homework. And then, once I've done that, confirm that what they're saying is accurate. And because we have to, we absolutely have to verify and validate our assumptions, then I can kind of say, okay, I'm going to follow this person who talks about continued claims. I'm going to follow this person who talks about the CPI or PCE. But I do that validation myself, because there is just no end to misunderstanding out there. And I think anybody can pick a data point and sort of create an argument. And I think a lot of us learned this if you had to take statistics early on. But those jobs number, it wasn't great. And, adding part-time jobs is not going to be the kind of job growth we need for people to be able to afford the homes where they are priced out there today. And that kind of brings me to the CPI, which we got this morning and was a little hotter. Shelter was hotter month over month. And, I think that maybe surprised a couple of people, but, if you really dive into the understanding on how the Fed calculates that, shelter, I think is going to be persistently high Rent is coming down, or in many cases, it's not coming down yet. It's just not accelerating. And that is not going to help the regular consumer out there. So a little harder than everybody expected, which means that the 10-year is probably not, it's going to keep sort of where it is right now. Is having a hard time getting below that 4% mark. Now, of course, anything could happen, an exogenous event. We're already seeing that shipping rates are going up due to the conflict in the Middle East. So those shipping rates will impact the cost of goods. We don't know exactly everything it's going to impact. But I think everybody wants to take a victory lap about kind of, deflation or inflation coming down. And I just think it's going to be choppier. It's going to take longer. I do think the path is down, but when you have these conflicts that really can throw a wrench. I think a lot of people thought there'd be no inflation. And then when we had the war in Ukraine, that really is what kind of, was the accelerator there. And so these exogenous events are important to track because they could have big impacts to the economy, to rates here. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is actually, I mentioned last week, Ivy Zellman. You guys, I think most of you that watch this know how much I'm a fan of hers and their research. And I was talking last week how they got a little, I think, overexcited about these rate moves, these small rate moves, but they came out with a really excellent proprietary study this week or late last week around the cost of renting versus the cost of owning. I think a lot of us have seen the Redfin articles about, there's only like 4 cities in the United States where it's cheaper to own than rent. What Zellman and Associates did, they did their own proprietary model. They kind of came up with the fact that right now per square foot, it's 9% more expensive to own than rent. And then from a total cost of ownership, it's 25% more expensive to own than rent. And this is, of course, not just your mortgage rates, not just your home prices, but it's going to be your property taxes, it's going to be your insurance, and it's going to be your cost of repairs. And in their analysis, they believe if we get down to a mortgage rate around 5%, that things start to balance out. Not that owning becomes, more affordable than renting, but it just comes into balance. That's a huge rate move down. And, I think that a lot of people were watching the 10-year and believed that we were going to get down faster than I think is actually going to occur this year. And just remember that mortgage rates track the 10-year. Now, that spread has widened a little bit, but everyone in the industry watches the 10-year for directional, the directional moves in mortgage rates. So, we're kind of hovering where we are. Again, exogenous events can change this, but I don't think it's time for a total victory lap or around kind of these rates moving down, 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 way down to a point that would have a massive impact on the industry. Okay, how could they have a massive impact on the industry? Refinances. And so that kind of brings me to a conversation. So mortgage applications. So last week we talked and they were down, especially looking at those not seasonally adjusted numbers. This week we have kind of a mixed picture. If you looked at the seasonally adjusted numbers, both purchase and refinance applications were up. Now let's just stop for a second. What is this tracking? This is tracking the number of people that are coming in filling out a mortgage application. That doesn't mean that they qualify. It just means that they're showing interest. They're filling out that mortgage application. Okay, so, it'll take us a minute to see whether those applications actually turned into closed loans. Well, but if you look at the non-adjusted numbers, you'll see refinance is up 17% while purchase is down 9% year over year. And, refinance being up, you have to go back last year and it was down 80+% in refinance. And so, refinance, I know I'm saying it 2 different ways. That's the Southerner in me. Sorry. But this is kind of the crack of the mortgage industry. If you can get those refinances, they honestly, they're a lot of people in the industry would love to do that over purchase because they're not nearly as hard. And I can remember being on a project at PNC Bank right as we were going into the lockdown and not really understanding. We were having to, none of our teams were able to work, none of our offshore teams were able to work. Everybody was sent home. But suddenly overnight, we had these exponential increases in mortgage applications. We were processing over 1 million pages a day. And honestly, it was like an 80% increase within a matter of a couple of weeks. That's how nuts it went. It was like everybody was at home, saw the rates and like, hey, I can refinance. But so that is the crack that many in the mortgage industry love. Purchase is a little bit harder, but why would refinance numbers, applications go up? Well, that's not a good sign because rates aren't low enough to make that, a super smart decision. They're low enough if you have high credit card debt and you want to consolidate your debt, but what we often see in this industry is that when people do refinance at these levels, they pay off their debt, but they just continue to spend on those credit cards. And that's when you start to see the upside down situations where essentially people owe more than the house is worth. And those numbers are small right now, but I guarantee you, as we see these refinances, continue, that trend is going to persist and go higher. So applications were up for refinances, down for purchases, but at the same time, MBA or Mortgage Bankers Association came out this week and set and their credit index, their mortgage credit availability index was down to the lowest level since 2012. And honestly, if you that's when they started the series, so we don't know before then. But I very much remember 2012, and the only people sort of buying at that time were ones were kind of Wall Street, and they were getting a real good deal from the GSEs or Fannie, Freddie, et cetera. So credit is constricting. Applications may be up, but if credit is constricting, we'll see how that pans out in actual closed loans. And so I talked to you guys about this is a weekly mortgage application, it's a weekly number. 1 week does not make a trend either up or down. And honestly, I do believe, as we go into the spring selling season, I don't want anybody to think that I think this is going to be completely dead. I think we are going to see a pretty active season, especially, I'm hearing from all over the country, not just in one place, that realtors are getting calls, people want to list for the spring. And so, I think this is going to be sellers are definitely wanting to get their properties on the market, but the buyer behavior is going to be what's interesting to watch, especially as the builders are coming under stress to offload that inventory. And so I think the builders are going to be competing with existing, while at the same both new homes and existing will be competing with all of that new multifamily and built for rent that's out there. And there is a ton of it, guys. And each month, I'm working on my monthly summary in Substack, which should be out in the next few days. But you can just see occupancy increasing every single month on an aggregate level, and then pretty significantly in some of these more challenged markets, especially in Texas. Okay, lots going on. One last thing I wanted to mention. So all of this, there was an article by Lending Tree yesterday about 30% of people in the top 100 markets across the country are struggling to make their debt payments. So that statistic really paints a stark picture of the economy. And I'll probably say this at least 40 more times, but the election is going to matter a lot this year in terms of narrative. And, I think when you see headlines like that, we're going to start seeing everything kind of crank up about what people are doing for affordability. Personally, I saw just recently Senator Warren put out a tweet about, we just need to build more homes. I responded and said, if you persecuted non-owner occupancy fraud, you would probably find a lot of your missing homes. I wish that tweet had gotten a little more traction, but it got some. But point being that people are going to do everything they can to say they're addressing the affordability crisis because it's what everybody is thinking about, except for probably your top 10%, because I think even in your top 20%, people have come to the conclusion that things are just too pricey to sustain the kind of spending they did last year. But the narrative machine is going to be going full court press. Also this week, they're talking about the housing budget. I think it's about a $10 billion proposal, which matches what they did last year, which would come in like down payment assistance and things like that. So we'll be watching that because the election is going to make this year, it's a big, in terms of the price discovery we all want. I think it's going to slow things down. And I think that's why, my forecast doesn't show us having massive drops in home prices this year, pretty modest drops in home prices. But in some markets, I think absolutely a lot bigger ones. So that's why it's important that we're tracking these local markets. But in 2025 is when I really see that the consumer is just going to be tapped out completely. These programs just aren't going to sustain it anymore. And the narrative machine is going to run out of steam. And so, but, forecasts can change depending on things happening that we're not, that we weren't expecting. And I can tell you, there's a lot of noise happening, in the banking sector, in the bond markets. There looks to be a lot of liquidity challenges and collateral challenges and a lot of kind of crazy things that are going on behind the scenes, very similar to what we saw back in March in the banking crisis. So there is definitely a probability of some type of credit event. And remember, a lot of people talk about subprime mortgages causing sort of the issues with Lehman, but in reality, those were collateral shortages, meaning, people were needing dollars and they couldn't access it anymore, either because, people just decided they didn't want to lend at that moment or true sort of constraints. And so we're seeing a bit of a similar setup. And so any way you slice it, this spring is going to be very interesting. And, I hope you guys kind of join me each week on this journey because it's very much going to be data dependent on what happens in the marketplace. Again, this is not investment advice. I don't like to make predictions. I like to talk about the path ahead. And, the path ahead is simple. People cannot afford these homes. So something has to change. And a lot of people will say, well, Wall Street will just come buy them all up. It doesn't make financial sense for them to do that right now. I mean, it just does not. And they're coming under stress as well. Don't, it's very easy to read the news and think that private equity, they're just the gods of this cycle. They're not. That they've had very challenged last couple of years. It's just no one wants that to be said in mainstream media, but it's happening. So, we can't, I think we just have to stay frosty because I don't think they're going to be able to go out there and buy every single home. And I think that, for both institutional investors and for you, things have just become too unaffordable. So things have to change, and the path forward, the only way I try thinking what could, happen to change the dynamic versus a correction. And the thing that needs to happen is for all of us to get much higher paying productive jobs. And that would mean probably that this headwind of AI is a nothing burger. I don't think it's the big something burger everybody thinks it is. I think it's going to take a lot longer to play out. But I don't think it's nothing. And so I think long term, we have to understand where we are. Okay. So thanks for joining again and coming back. We're going to dive into kind of the inventory The listings finally have short-term rental data. And then at the end of the show, I'm going to talk about a big upcoming trip where I'm probably going to just need some support on the road because it's going to be a little crazy. But listings for sale. So the Fed just posted inventory or, listings for sale for December. For whatever reason, it was about 2 weeks delayed from last month. We saw a negative 0.578% decrease in inventory. Now, I've talked to you before that this is seasonal. We see it every year. On average, it was about 10%. So we've actually decreased a little bit less than the average since 2017. But if you look year over year, we decreased by 9.23% last year. So this is a smaller decrease. And I believe, especially on what I'm seeing in certain local markets, we're about in hearing from local realtors that, we're going to see inventory increases. And in some places, they are going to increase fast, just like a swarm of locusts. So, okay. Top cities large percent increase in inventory week over week. This is listings for sale from 12/31 to 1/7. Phoenix at 6.66%, Scottsdale at 5.51%, Rochester at 3.78%, Hoboken at 3.13%. I hope to be able to visit Hoboken here shortly, see what's going on there. Lakewood Ranch at 2.73%. These are listings for sale. Now, guys, I'll post these in the show notes, and so you can follow along there. They're also going to be in the Substack. I hope to publish that in the next couple of days. Top cities large percent increase in inventory month over month. So this is very interesting. We only had 4 locations out of the 76, I think 77 now actually, cities I'm tracking, which, against the trend. But Fort Myers was one of those, up 2.07%. Boca Raton at 1.26%, and Lakewood Ranch at 0.43%, and Phoenix at 0.10%. Okay, and that's top cities large percent increase in inventory month over month. Okay, so we retired. I've now had a year of tracking my 20 core markets. I increased those over the year. Each week I was increasing more and more. So, but for this first list, it's these top 20. We'll be bringing all the markets in as we proceed through the year. And we'll retire the top inventory increases from the start. But these are their top cities, a large percent increase year over year in inventory. So San Ramon, this I started tracking because I had a client who had interest there. Even though small numbers, it is very striking just to see how this inventory increased, but up 60% year over year. Knoxville up 24.94% year over year. Johnson City up 17.47% year over year. That's Tennessee. Dallas at 16.43%. Denver at 12.32%. Austin at 9.85%. Nashville at 5.54%. Atlanta at 5.43%. And Seattle at 2.35%. And Miami in number 10 at an increase of 2%. Now, when I posted some of this on Twitter, people were like, where's San Fran? Where's LA? Well, because they had already had increased inventory as we ended the year last year. Those increases weren't as marked as these. So they had started their trend upward already, but these are the ones where we really throughout the year saw increases in inventory. Okay, listings for rent. So listings for rent dropped on average about 3% week over week and about 2.83% month over month. But compared to the 24-week average, rents are up about 1%. So I don't have year over year for these. I started tracking these back in May, so we have a few months. And, from a listings for rent perspective, I don't have a lot of insight why those would decrease seasonally. But that seems to be happening, but we'll keep tracking the data. I expect these to go up as well because, in my monthly summary, I share occupancy for multifamily, for instance, and it is just decreasing very significantly in many markets and on an aggregate level, month over month, the trend is just down. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. But top cities with a large percent increase in single family rental listings, 12/31 to 1/7, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, low numbers here, 32%. Pittsburgh at 15%. Sedona at 8%. Augusta at 7.82%. Bentonville, Arkansas at 7%. I've been hearing a lot about Bentonville. Saw a tweet today about a bunch of cranes there. That'll definitely be on my list for a trip later this year because I kind of think the party might just be getting started there and a lot of activity. They actually were one of the few markets with increases in sales. So if you have any insight you want to, drop in the comments about Bentonville, please do so. Okay, top city was largest percent increase in single family rentals month over month. So remember, we're seeing decreases. So these are going against the trend. Again, Portsmouth here at 65%, Sedona at 29%, Tupelo at 17.24%, and Tupelo's in Mississippi, Pittsburgh at 13%, and Knoxville at 8.61%. Okay, and then these are the top cities with the highest percent increase to the 24-week average. Wish I had year over year, but we're going to use this 24-week average. Sevierville up 38%, Knoxville up 31%, Portsmouth up 30%, Dallas up 22.79%, and Sedona up 22.5%. Okay, short-term rental. Finally, we have November. Sorry for the delay there. I'm going to have December in about a week and a half, so I'll try to get those numbers out faster. So I'll stop here for just a second and say that as much as I really believe that mania was dissipating last year, I think as we started to see the stock market, kind of take back some of those losses, improve, that sentiment started to improve. And I think people still wanted to get into the Airbnb game. They weren't listening to me. They weren't listening to, those of us in our little bubble on what I'll call FinTwit. And so speculation persisted last year, and it is just so crazy to me. But most of the cities still have increases in short-term rental listings. And so top cities with largest percent increase in short-term rentals listings November to October, or comparing November and October. Bakersfield, which cracks me up, at 15.89% in California. Boston at 15.8%. Huntsville, Alabama at 12.98%. Huntsville is one of the cities I'll be going to. Tupelo at 10.77%, who is going to be doing short-term rental in Tupelo. Richmond, Virginia at 9.6%. Okay, top cities with largest percent decrease in short-term rental listings for October to November. So Portland was down significantly. And I'm not sure if this is a data issue, so I kind of want to see what happens next month, but they were down like 82%. They have strict laws, but I saw a lot of articles in September about those laws not being enforced. So maybe something's happening there where they are enforcing them. So this is, something we're going to keep an eye on. Sacramento was down 14.29%. Cape May was down 9.02%. Austin was down 7.52%, and Chicago was down 5.74%. Okay, top cities' largest increase in short-term rental listings year over year. So these are increases year over year, November 2023 to November 22. So San Ramon, yeah, increase of 66.56%. I guess they had to do something with all that inventory. Fort Myers at 66.62%. This is a lot to do with Ian, but you're seeing that market try to get back in the Airbnb game. Winter Garden at 54.86%, Boca Raton at 53.27%, and El Cajon at 48.57%. Okay, and then top cities' largest percent decrease in short-term rental listings year over year. And this is a very short list. There are only 3 cities where this is the case. And New York is one of them due to regulation, down 5.24%. Philadelphia down 4%, and Pembroke Pines down 3% in Florida. So, people are still coming in. They're the last ones in the door. It happens a lot this way. sort of institutional started the speculation at the end of 2012. It just started gaining steam. You went from long-term rental to then the short-term rental craze. Um, so, it's just it's a little disconcerting and it's a little worrisome that even with all of the news we got last year about the Airbnb bust, that people are still we're still piling into this. And for us, we've seen no indication that this is gonna, it's gonna stop. Okay, yet. So hopefully, well, it's not that I wish that people don't make money with this investment. It's more that this investment has to be rational and these markets are oversaturated. Okay, because I like to just share with you top cities with the highest average daily rate for November. This list pretty much stays the same. Newport Beach at 499, Rosemary Beach at 473. These are average daily rates, so $499, $473. Palm Springs at $450. Encinitas at $417, and Cape May at New Jersey at $365. Okay, quickly on to commercial real estate. So, a little bit of news this week. Brookfield, these are the people that were a little mad about that auction of the failed banks, and claimed that the FDIC did not take the highest bidder. But Brookfield is in the news again, selling a manufactured home site. For those of you that don't know, private equity kind of came in and bought a bunch of mobile home parks, and what they're doing there is just kind of depressing, in terms of cut down on maintenance, cut down a lot of things, and people kind of get stuck because they own their mobile home, their manufactured home, but they can't move it, and but they can't afford to. But the rent at these parks is too much to pay, so then they have to foreclose. So you know, Brookfield is out there selling this. The headline says because they kind of want to offload some housing bets, and I'm sure they do. But this this space kind of private equity has done some real damage there. I encourage you guys. There's a book called Plunder. I'll put it in the show notes. Just talks about what private equity has done in the healthcare sector, as well as in sort of these mobile home parks. And other news as well, Invitation Homes got a DOJ fine. Many say not enough, and I would agree with that, for essentially unlawful rent increases. But they did pay, pay some borrowers reparations, but not enough. But again, guys, this is where we can, if you do have to use a long-term rental, try to make a choice and not choose these guys. And if you don't know how to figure out whether they own the property, reach out to me and I'll try and help you figure it out, because these are not good guys. Okay, and then we got news about sort of overall occupancy. Moody's came out with a study, and according to them, 19.6% of office space in major U.S. cities was not leased, and this is the most on record, and at least going back to 1979, which is when Moody's has the data for us. So as you can see, there is a lot going on. And, I encourage everybody to stop by here, watch the show, because mainstream media is not out there to do anybody any favors. And as we go into this election year, I can already feel it, just everybody kind of cranking up the narrative and the rhetoric. And it's going to be really difficult to understand what's going on. So we're going to have to pay close attention to the data, close attention, to the listings and to what's happening out there in the market to really get a sense of what's going on. But again, this isn't investment advice. This is about the path forward for housing. And until something, and I joke sometimes, the UFOs land and give us higher paying jobs, the housing market will have to correct. That will take time. The housing market is like the Titanic, and turning it around takes a lot of time. As you guys know, especially those who have been listening to me since April, and we've got kind of a long path ahead of us, which I know nobody wants to hear, but I'd rather tell you the truth than yell at you. Okay, thanks for joining again, guys. You can reach me on X Twitter at M3_Melody, Melody, just at me there. M3 Melody Substack, and here on YouTube, and Melody Wright at LinkedIn. You can drop me a message there, but very behind there. So it's better to try and catch me on X Twitter if at all possible. Okay. Thanks again for joining. I'm glad it's sunny today here in Tennessee. I hope it's sunny where you are. Oh, again, sorry. Just want to talk a little bit about my trip. So I'm going to be going on a 10-day extravaganza, and I'll be partnering with Travis from Real Estate Mindset and Todd Sachs. And so we're going to be doing all kinds of cities. We're going to start with Atlanta. We're going to do Raleigh. We're going to do Richmond. Sorry, guys. We're going to try and do some other cities, maybe Washington, D.C., maybe Philadelphia, hoping to do Huntsville. Planning to do Huntsville on the way back, and perhaps Myrtle Beach and some areas, maybe Charleston and South Carolina. So it's going to be a really big trip. We're going up to a real estate conference, Inman, in New York City. We'll be doing some live shows from there. I'll be doing a show with Travis tomorrow where we'll talk more in detail about it. He's kind of got the schedule. I'm letting him sort of own the schedule there, and I'll be providing commentary and data as we go to these site visits. And he has a drone, which is going to be super exciting, especially for my readers. Okay, sorry, I almost forgot that. But have a great week, guys. Thanks again for stopping by, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye.